I'm gonna switch to English now. I hope this is not a problem for most of you. I'm very pleased to welcome next speaker. His name is Yuri Terekhov. Yuri comes from Moscow. To be more precise, he was born in Arkhangelsk.
I'll tell about him.
Oh, you'll tell yourself. Okay. I know Yuri for a few years. Basically, he came to Projekcie Arizona a few years ago. But his story is really interesting. He's an opposition fighter in Russia. He had his portal, Rufabula, a few years ago that was called illegal. That was called by the government extremist. These guys had big issues, big problems. He's currently involved in Free Russia Forum in Vilnius. He's a manager of programs, educational programs down there. He started a think tank. He will start a think tank, but he worked in Belsat TV as well. You probably know about Belsat because this is a Polish project, basically. Funded by Polish government, by the way. Should be private. Mostly, you know about Belsat because of the Belarusian affairs. But what many people do not know, they also cover now entire Russian-speaking world, with Russia being largest. So last year was not just COVID calm time for Yuri. As you probably know, the prosecutions of opposition in Russia, they go harder and harder against them. And this includes libertarians, who are not the largest movement, of course, of the opposition, but they are present, they are visible, and they do a difference. These guys have a hard time in Russia. Yuri is one of these brave, really brave people who stand up to Putinism, to dictatorship, but also stand up for freedom, not for just democracy and give me anything else than Putin. He's not one of these guys. He knows what to present instead of the system. He will talk today mostly about libertarianism in Russia. Here in Poland, we don't know too much about libertarianism in Russia, I am afraid. So you're gonna really uncover a very interesting topic for most of us. And I'm eager myself to listen to this. So no more me, Yuri, that's your time.
Thank you, Jacek, for giving a nice introduction to my speech. Yes, and I'm going to speak about about libertarianism in Russia, about the history of it, from the early times actually, and the current situation. So I'd like to start this glimpse into Russian libertarianism with the story of my home city, or my region. I think it will give you some impression about what are we dealing with in Russia. So I was born in the northwest of Russia, in the city of Arkhangelsk, or Archangel, by the White Sea. And actually this area, the Slavic people came there from the Novgorod Republic, this ancient, like the medieval Russian state, which was later conquered by Moscow, unfortunately, like about 1,000 years ago. And for centuries, these people, they found a rich land with plenty of fish, timber, fur, and moreover, more than this, they had seashores, and for centuries, those people maintained free trade with Norwegians, and they even developed a separate language for trade called Russinorsk, and it was this land became quite rich, quite wealthy. There was no serfdom there, and my city, Arkhangelsk, was founded in the 16th century as a seaport for trade with British, and as you know, maybe you don't know, huge part of the British fleet that conquered the New World was built with the Northern Russian timber, was Northern Russian wood, and maybe the Mayflower was also made with Russian, actually, Northern Russian wood, who knows. So this was a really wealthy region and with high literacy rate, and it's not a surprise that famous Russian scientist, poet, and encyclopedist Mikhail Lomonosov, founder of Moscow University, also came from this region. He was the son just of an ordinary peasant, merchant, fisherman, he came on foot to Moscow when he was 20 years old, and 10 years after he founded the Moscow University. And do you know why there were no Russians on the Titanic? There were some Poles, there were some Finns from the Russian Empire, but there were no Russians. Why? Because back then there was a direct sea liner connection between Arkhangelsk and New York City. So it was like a really vibrant cosmopolitan city. There was a Polish Kościół, there was a German Kirchen, there was actually the place the house I was raised in. Like before that, there was an Anglican church there. So of course, when communists came, this region became one of the centers of the resistance to communism. And for about 2 years, up to 1920, they contained Red Armies, but unfortunately the forces were not was far from equal. And when communists came, they turned the whole country into a huge prison. And they started actually with my region. So the first concentration camp, the first gulag, was established on Solovki archipelago, on the place of the medieval monastery. And though there were lots of uprisings all over the country against communism, still all of them were suppressed. And as well as the thought of intellectuals and philosophers were also suppressed. And in the first Soviet years, they were not yet killed, but just they tried to send them out of the country. There was I think once they sent out about a few dozens of philosophers to Germany on this philosopher steamer. Well, fortunately, also Ayn Rand also escaped Gulag back then. And after the dark times of Stalinism and Second World War, there appeared the whole movement of dissidents in the Soviet Union. Those people who opposed the regime, opposed the system, who denied cooperation with the government. It was a very diverse movement, actually. Many were like social democrats or Trotskyists, wanted to return to the Lenin's standards. But actually, among them were first Russian libertarians. And I can name 3 of them: Vladimir Bukovsky, Alexander Podrobinek, and Valeria Novodvorskaya. I think the most outstanding of them was Vladimir Bukovsky, of course. This guy, he spent 12 years in prison, in camps, in psychiatric facilities where Soviets used to also send their political opponents. And he was really strong and consistent in opposing the communism as a system, not just the government. And he became really well known in the West, and finally Soviets decided just to send him out of the country, and they exchanged him for Luis Corvalán in 1976. It was the leader of the Communist Party of Chile. And I read his books, Vladimir Bukovsky's books. It was really, it was really fun, because not so many things changed since then, to be honest, both in Russia and in the West. And when he came to the West, he actually settled in Cambridge in England in the 70s. He expected to see this, this capitalism he dreamed of, but he saw it was in the 70s. He saw socialism, the growing state. It was the 70s, I think, the darkest time of British economic history before Margaret Thatcher, and he later became the strong advocate of Miss Thatcher. And actually, he also took part in participated in British politics, and in the beginning of 2000s he became one of the founders of the United Kingdom Independence Party together with Nigel Farage. He also participated in Russian politics. Later, he tried to run in the presidential election in 2008, though he was denied registration. And in the beginning of the 90s, he was invited by Boris Yeltsin to study the Communist Party archives. And until he was dismissed, he managed to make photocopies of thousands of documents. And among them, there was a really interesting document. It was like a report by some official about some coffee break talks with the young senator from Delaware, Joe Biden, in the 70s. And in this report, it said that Joe Biden assured Soviet leadership that he supports human rights movement in the Soviet Union only because it's good for his re-election, for his constituency. That's very characteristic, I think. Actually, when the communism fell, there was no alternative to the free market. But we also had shock therapy in Russia, but it was done in quite a different way. Actually, the person who is considered to be the major reformist, free market reformist, Yegor Gaidar, before that he was a member of the Communist Party, and he was actually even the editor-in-chief of the magazine called The Communist in the 80s. So such people, they managed the privatization, and that's why huge assets of property and large industries ended up in the hands of people who were either close to the government or to mafia or security services. That's how the oligarchy in Russia appeared. And due to the huge inflation, the vast majority of people were not able to take part in the privatization. And still small businesses and some new fields, they developed and flourished, among them, retail, advertisement, digital, everything on the internet. So, and later in the beginning of 2000s, also there were some positive reforms done during the first term of Putin, but it's not thanks to Putin. It's thanks to Andrei Illarionov, the Russian economist, who was then the economic advisor to the president. This guy is a real libertarian. He later became a senior research fellow at the Cato Institute, and during these years they did a really important tax reform. So now we have the 13% flat tax. So they also eased opening the business. But still, all of those reforms were incomplete in the absence of a real rule of law there. And when Putin came to power, he had also his own friends, cronies, who also wanted a piece of this pie. And the state intervention began growing with the capture of Yukos, with the capture of the main media, television stations in Russia, with the return of the Soviet narratives, the Soviet anthem, all of this, this nostalgia, Soviet nostalgia. And in 2005, Andrei Illarionov was dismissed, and 2 years later, in St. Petersburg in 2007, the Libertarian Party of Russia actually was established. So it's now 14 years from now. I think they have branches in almost, I think, all Russian regions, but they tried to, they applied for registration many times, and they were consistently refused. So I think it is so far the oldest non-registered party in Russia. Still exists. The members still like paying their party fees, and still they took part in some elections. The members of the LPR, of the Libertarian Party of Russia, they took part in many elections. Some of them were elected. The two first people who were elected were Vera Kichanova and Andrei Shalnov. Andrei Shalnov was the chairman of the Libertarian Party back then. They got 2 seats in the local councils in Moscow and Moscow region. In 2017, about 5 other LPR members got elected also in Moscow and Moscow region. But anyway, they are able to take part in some local elections, but they were also consistently refused from running from registration in the elections of the higher level. I mean, regional one or federal elections. So that's why they concentrated their activity on some conferences, on enlightenment activities, on education. So, and since 2010, they held 12 Adam Smith readings in Moscow. Adam Smith reading is the 2 days conference, Libertarian conference, and it gathered up to 1,000 participants at once. It's a huge event, and among the speakers were Lawrence Reed, Fleming Rose, Kaha Bindukidze, Jeffrey Neal, Andrei Leonov, of course. Since 2015, they also held 5 Ayn Rand readings in St. Pete, organized by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation and the Libertarian Party of Russia. And 2 years ago, in 2019, Hans Hermann Hoppe came to Moscow, and he was welcomed as a superstar at his speech at one of Moscow's clubs. There were people waiting in lines to hear Hans Hermann Hoppe actually. And this event was organized by Mikhail Svetov, another guy I would like to talk about. This guy, I would say, he's a libertarian evangelist in Russia. He's a young, popular blogger. He has about, I think, 300,000 subscribers on YouTube. Some of his videos get about over 1 million views. And a few years ago, he also did a couple of, maybe I think more, libertarian tours all over Russia. He spoke I think in all major cities in Russia, and that's why he could involve hundreds and thousands of young Russians into this movement, into the party. And so unlike many confused Western libertarians who praise Putin sometimes, it happens. Russian libertarians, from the very beginning, they opposed Putinism because they saw what it means: state expansion, return of Soviet narratives and nostalgia, civil liberties suppression, anti-Westernism, and military aggression. They took part in every major mass protest in Russia from 2011. They also took part in the protests against the annexation of Crimea and war in eastern Ukraine. They themselves organized a few protests in Moscow, quite huge protests in Moscow in 2018 and 2019 against the government's attempts to restrict internet, to block websites. Actually, in 2018, they held an event together with Pavel Durov, another actually great Russian libertarian entrepreneur. He previously had founded the Fundacji, VK, I think the most popular Russian social network. It beats Facebook in Russia. But after the 2011 protests, the government pressured him, and they made him to sell his share in the company to the government-affiliated guys. And he left Russia, and he later founded Telegram, the messenger, which is supposed to be free. It is popular in Russia, in Iran, in such countries. And in 2018, the Russian government, they tried to block this app. But actually, they spent like millions of dollars, but still they failed. With some minor issues, it continued to work quite well. So, and in the recent years, we see in Russia very fast devolution of Putinism from kind of soft authoritarianism to the outright dictatorship, the full dictatorship, and it also hits libertarians in Russia, of course. Like in 2017, 30 participants of Adam Smith's readings in Moscow were detained by the police after they returned from lunch to the conference, including Mikhail Svetov was also detained back then. In 2018, there was a criminal case against LPR member Dmitry Kolepnikov for maintaining Tor browser hosting. And since 2019, especially last year and this year, dozens, if not hundreds, of LPR activists and members were detained, searched, questioned. In 2019, another popular libertarian blogger in Russia, Igor Zhukov, he got a 3-year suspended sentence for protesting in Moscow. He actually tried to run in the Moscow City Council elections, but he was denied registration. And only thanks to the huge publicity and support from libertarians from all over the world, he got not like real prison term, but suspended sentence. But I think it won't work like anymore in the future. Another Libertarian Party activist and member, Gleb Maryasov from Krasnoyarsk in Siberia, he's now in jail for taking part in January protests this year. And in this situation, many members and leadership of the Libertarian Party, they chose to emigrate, to leave the country for a while. I was in Georgia in June, in Tbilisi, and I met there the chairman of the Libertarian Party, Yaroslav Conway, there, and the press secretary of the party also there. Mikhail Svetov also had to leave country. There was also a criminal case against him. He's now in Brazil, and I think in a few weeks he's taking part in Liberty International event in Colombia with Jacek. So, VIP speaker, right? Yeah. So, keynote speaker. Okay. So, and well, summing up, what I can say, libertarians in Russia are an independent, I would say, though integral parts of the anti-Putin movement. They are independent because they have their own agenda. They have very strong ideology, which is not which is supported not by all the members, all the participants of the anti-Putin movement. And still, we are all the same boat. Like everybody understands that under Putin, there is no place for independent politics. There is no place for taking part in the elections. There's no chance in promoting your ideas. I even doubt if there are going to be Adam Smith conference this year. I don't think it's gonna happen. So still, libertarians are becoming more popular in Russia, in Russian cities, especially among young people, thanks to Svetov and other bloggers who are also really popular on YouTube. It's not only Svetov, it's also Mikhail Pozharsky, Yegor Zhukov, Pavel Usanov, and some other guys. And young people in Russia, they see libertarianism as a kind of alternative to both Putinism, as well with his like Soviet nostalgia, militarism, and so on, and also an alternative to this leftist social justice warriors discourse. So, and I think like summing up that there's definitely demand for libertarianism in Russia, and it's growing. But as I said, like under Putin, there is no chance. But after Putin, when it happens, I don't know. So don't ask me this question. When it happens, yes, I think there is a place for libertarianism in Russia. Thank you.